Hello and welcome to I Am with Eric Faria. I'm your host, and today I have with me Michael Rosenbaum, who is a hypnotherapist,
Right.
a spiritual life coach, and a metaphysics practitioner.
Oh, pretty good.
I got it,
You
right?
got it.
Okay.
Pretty much.
Thank you for being here,
Yeah.
Michael. I have a lot to talk about with you. So let's just begin by talking about your road to spirituality. Can you illuminate us a little bit on your journey?
Okay. Well, I guess it really started in my 20s. And in my 20s, I was kind of in a dark time in my life, kind of insecure. And I came across a seminar that I took, and it really helped me. The way it helped me began to really value my own feelings and value who I was rather than looking outside of myself for answers or looking outside of myself for validation. I would say would be a better way of saying it. And out of that, I began to meet some people, and I would guess my first foray into spirituality was somebody who taught me meditation. So I would say that's one of the greatest ways to begin to access spirituality by going inside. There's lots of different kinds of meditation. They're all valid, they're all good. I would just say find the one you like and do that one. But do it consistently.
Sure.
You want to do it consistently. Spirituality is not a part-time job. I'm going to do it 5 minutes, and then next week I'm going to do another 5 minutes, and then you're going to be
I wish
okay.
it were like that, but yeah, it doesn't work like that.
But that makes no sense because
Right.
nothing in life's like that, right?
Yeah.
If you want to work out with weights, right? If you did 5 minutes once a week, you're not going to get very far.
No, not very
right?
far.
But if you did 15 minutes a day, you would get somewhere.
Sure.
So spirituality is the same way. So I began to learn about it and became interested. And out of my meditation experiences, I began to have other experiences inside of myself over time, over the course of a couple of years. And I began to feel things in my body, electrical impulses in my body. And that led me to studying energy healing. And I actually went to a 4-year school because I felt like I didn't know anything. So I wanted to really learn something. And the teacher there was very spiritual, so she kind of turned me on to some of those ideas. And then that led me to hypnotherapy. We were talking earlier.
Right, we were, yes.
You know, so I don't know if you want me to tell
Of
that little
course,
story
yeah,
now?
please
Okay.
go, yeah.
So here I was trained, 4 years of training. I really understood energy flow, and I'm working with clients. And some percentage, I mean, not a small percentage, 10%, 15%, even 20%, I'd be working with them, the energy would be flowing through me to them, and then they would stop the flow. And I would be really puzzled. Why are they stopping the flow? Now, they weren't doing it consciously,
Sure.
but they were doing it. Because I knew the difference between my energy, your energy, and I wasn't stopping the flow.
Right.
But they were. So I became very curious, and I said, like, maybe I had my hand on your solar plexus, and I said, well, can you tell me what you feel is in your solar plexus right now? What's your experience? And they would describe something. It was some kind, they say a brick wall, a barrier, or something. It was always some kind of a barrier. And so then it led me to the next question, which was, what's on the other side of the barrier? And always was an emotion. Anger, sadness, fear,
Right.
helplessness, whatever it was. The reason they had the wall, I began to understand, was because they didn't know how to deal with the feeling.
So they literally created a barrier.
That's right. And so, and then that led to physical problems, and that's why they're coming to see me. But they weren't willing to let the barrier down all the time. And so I felt like I didn't really have a good tool for that. They didn't teach me that in energy school,
Right.
how to deal with somebody's feelings. So I felt like I needed to learn something new. And that's what led me to hypnotherapy, particularly to regression therapy, to help people solve those problems. And I would say, and the reason why I think that's important is because if people are interested in learning who they are spiritually, right, and reading books really doesn't do it, as far as I'm concerned.
You can
It's
read 1,000
interesting.
books. Yeah, sure.
It can inspire you, but it doesn't give you the experience. If you meditate, you begin to have an experience.
Yes.
If you do a process, you can have an experience. So I'm really big on experience. If someone comes to see me, I want to make sure they have an experience, not just an intellectual understanding, but an experience. So, so when we're teaching about spirituality, I think one of the biggest obstacles is everybody's issues, all their stuff, all those feelings, all that anger, all that fear, all that worry, all those negative judgments and everything else that our life is filled with, right?
Right.
And if you don't deal with that, you're not going to get very far spiritually.
So what you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, is that you actually have to go through these emotions in order to actually go to the other side and experience whatever it is you're meant to experience, spiritually speaking.
Well, you don't have to do that. You can do that, and I like doing that with the regression therapy to touch on them so you can make other choices. And we'll talk about that in the next
Because I feel
segment.
like people would be very fearful of dealing with those emotions that they have been, pushing aside for so long.
Good question. So if you bury your emotions and you put that wall up, the emotions don't go away and they act on you unconsciously. So you're not solving anything by pushing them away. However, just having an emotion, screaming or yelling, doesn't solve anything either.
Right.
So you have to work with a practitioner, someone who can guide you and help you come to a new understanding in your mind about what happened. If you put something together when you were a young child and forgot about it, your inner mind hasn't forgotten about it. And it acts on you, and you get triggered. That's why I like to say when people get upset, it's really just a trigger.
Yeah.
If you meet somebody and
A button that was pushed.
a button that was pushed. So if you met somebody and all of a sudden you felt angry or you felt afraid, it's really not about them. But they're reminding your inner mind of something that's unresolved, and your inner mind's giving you the unresolved feeling. But you can't solve it by changing that person or even working with that person, because it's not about that person. That's what I've come to find out over 15, 20 years, that it's really not about that. And so you have to find another method to do it. There's lots of ways to do it. I have some methods that are, very interactive and where you get information. I have others that are a little more passive and ask your inner mind to work it out. So you don't necessarily have to feel the feeling, but you do have to ask the mind to work it out. Because you wrote the program and it's sitting there.
Right.
And no one else can change it. I can't change it either.
Yeah.
I can't wave a magic wand and take your problems away.
Sure, it's like a software for a computer, right? That you wrote it.
Yes.
So people can not change the thing that you created yourself.
That's a great analogy. That's exactly right.
I just came up with this right now, but yes, I'm glad it worked.
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
Right.
And so what I try to teach people is the tools that you can use to go inside yourself and change the program. Once you change the program, it gives you a different response. It's really that simple.
Wow. And before we go for this segment, I know it goes by so fast, you were talking about the two things that you find are roadblocks for most people that you see nowadays. Can you mention what those 2 points are?
Yes, I would say the blame game, meaning when I blame somebody for what's happened to me. I don't like what happened. You made me angry. You made me sad. You hurt me. It's all untruths. I mean, my audience might not like to hear that.
Sure. No, I
But
get
the
it.
truth is people do unsavory things, inappropriate things, no doubt. But your response to it is your response. You wrote it. You could have had a different response. You didn't have to respond that way. You wrote the program in your mind. And the minute you blame somebody, you give all your power away. And then you got to get them to change for you to feel better, which is not true. Nobody has to change anything for you to have a sense of well-being. You only have to change you. So I find that very freeing. So people look around you, go tomorrow, watch how many people blame something on somebody else.
Right.
It's like a virus.
It is.
In this world, and it makes you powerless, and it stops you from feeling good. So I like to help people solve that. The other thing is negative judgments.
Oh.
Anytime you have a negative judgment about somebody, you turn the life current off. I think I mentioned to you earlier, I had a teacher that once told me, in every moment in life, the spigot's either on, which is the life force spigot, or it's off. That's it. You have two choices at every given moment. So if you want to learn about spirituality, if you want to have a sense of well-being, you got to have the life spigot on. If you suppress your feelings, the life spigot's off. If you blame somebody for something, the life spigot's off. If you're holding tightly onto something, the life spigot's off. So I would say you want to find out how to turn the life spigot back on if you want to have a sense of enjoyment and mystery and love and bliss. I mean, life's amazing. Life has so many amazing things, and we're the ones that's stopping it. You know, God's all around us. God's not talking to you. You're not listening. That's the way I would say it.
Perfect stopping point for this segment. And I will come back and talk more to you about this.
Great.
So for everyone watching, we will be right back after this break. Hello and welcome back to I Am with Eric Faria. Once again, I'm your host and I'm here with Michael Rosenbaum. And I wanted to ask you, we were talking during the break, you talked about the blame game, right? Which is one of the things that keeps people just stuck and unable to move forward with their lives.
Absolutely.
So what if something happened to you when you were 3, 4, 5, 6 years old that perhaps you didn't have the chance to say no? You were a child, so you couldn't speak for yourself, fend for yourself, and you were, let's say, molested or beaten or assaulted.
Absolutely.
How do we get past that?
Well, I would say even though those are terrible things, right, it's the same energy, the way your brain or your mind works with it. So if you can't let go of that, you keep re-injuring yourself. Like an analogy, we say, let's say your dad smacked you and bloodied your lip, right? Terrible thing, right? Well, within 1 or 2 weeks, your lip heals itself. But if you keep going back to your anger and you're upset about your father hitting you, it's like you're hitting yourself all over again, over and over and over again, making that impression stronger. So what we talked about in the break is the idea of forgiveness. So people, you know, how could you forgive somebody who molested you, right? So forgiveness is not saying it was okay. I forgive you, therefore it's okay. No, it's not about that. Forgiveness is not pretending, oh, I forgive you, really wasn't so bad. No, it's not saying that. But what it's saying is that I'm ready to move on. So as a metaphor, as I mentioned at the break, it's like if you're angry at somebody, it's like picking up a hot coal and throwing it at them. Maybe you hit them, maybe you don't, but every time you pick up the hot coal, you burn your hand.
Definitely.
So forgiveness is saying, you know what, I'm tired of burning my hand all the time. And I think what hurts people and keeps them stuck is that they can't be in present time. Whatever happened, it's over. You don't need to resonate like that anymore. You don't need to have that fear protection anymore. It's not who you are now. So one of the things that I do with people is regression therapy. They'll go back to a molestation. They'll go back to a time they got beaten or whatever, right? Just to touch on it. I'm not interested in somebody feeling bad, but you need to see how that little child put it together. Because you're an adult now, and you can reparent yourself. You can help that little child look at it differently and say, hey, wait a minute. It's not going to happen now. It's okay. You can let go of that. You're okay. In fact, children, since I've done thousands and thousands of regressions, I don't think I've ever had an instance where a child didn't think it was their fault. What happened?
It usually is the case, right? They think they're the ones to blame.
Right, which is a total faulty thought. It's not true. When you go back and look at that and see how that child felt, you can say, wait a minute, that wasn't my fault. They were having a bad day, or that's who they were. They were an abusive whatever. Right. It's not me. I'm not bad. And so I do a lot of that inner child work, if we go there, to help you see your beauty and reignite that and reparent yourself. You can't imagine how healing that is. It totally changes the trajectory of your life if you can have that experience.
For sure.
But
yeah.
if I just told you that intellectually, oh, this happened and you felt that, it would have like almost zero effect. But if you experienced it and you saw it and you made a new choice, golden. That has a big effect and it creates change. And I'm really interested in creating change. And the way I'm so interested in this ego personality stuff is because I'm a spiritual counselor. I like to teach people about spirituality. You got all that stuff going. You got molested when you were a kid, whatever. You're going to have a tough time accessing spirituality because you got all this blocks, all these things going on.
Yes, the
And
emotional
it stops
baggage.
you. The emotional baggage, it stops you. And something that I see in spiritual circles all the time, and I was guilty of it myself, right, is what I call a spiritual bypass.
What is that?
I'm going to go into this high spiritual place and then none of my problems are going to bother me anymore. Wrong. That doesn't work
Sweet
that
illusion.
way.
Yeah.
Sweet illusion. It doesn't. It's just not the way the mind works.
No.
So you have to deal with it in some way. You don't necessarily have to go back and do a regression. There's lots of great processes that are out there today to help your inner mind make new choices. But you got to do something that does that if you want your inner mind to make a new choice. And I feel like you can only go so far spiritually if you don't deal with the ego personality. It's just going to get too loud. It's just going to block you. And if you want to reach those higher levels of bliss, you got to deal with that.
Is that the reason why you were mentioning earlier why talk therapy by itself doesn't really create lasting changes, and why people sometimes are so stuck for years? I've seen people that have gone to talk therapy for like a decade and they're still talking about the same damn thing.
Right. Well, I would say, I'm not a talk therapist, and I honor that, and I think that's an important thing. I would say that talk therapy is really important for people who have really broken ego structures and need to have their hand held over a long period of time to feel safe and okay. And I think it plays a really important part. I really don't like the direction it's gone with psychiatry, where they're so quick to give a drug to try to change the path of the brain when your brain has the chemicals itself. And if you do these kinds of processes, your brain starts giving you different chemicals. And as I mentioned to you, I study positive psychology, and they're all about how you can remap the brain. You're never stuck with whatever you got. It's not hardwired at any age. It's proven you can change it. I think that's such a positive message. And your body has great chemicals, more powerful than the chemicals that the psychiatrist gives you. And
Through the medication,
you can turn them on. Having said that, if you're in a really difficult period in your life, you might need that medication to get you through that.
Right.
But I don't think it should be meant for the rest of your life. That's my personal opinion.
No, that's
People
what I
could
believe
differ,
too. Yeah.
But I think you can begin to create that on your own. And so it's like I have a client now that I've been seeing for a year or so, right? And he had a very, very difficult upbringing. And he told me, I've been in therapy for 30 years, and after 6 months, working again, he says, you did way more than I ever got in 30 years of therapy with the processes we're doing. And his level of well-being has just skyrocketed,
Yeah, no, I just want to clarify something. I have nothing against psychologists and psychotherapists. I actually see a psychologist every week, and I've been seeing him for over 2.5 years. But I think that what made a difference in my life was actually getting into action, not just talking about it with him, but also doing the work.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
And I feel like that's what's missing sometimes from talk therapy. It's just focused on the talk and the ego, what we consider the ego mind, right? What you were talking about.
Or places you get stuck in. So I have therapists who send people to me because we can do this inner mind work and kind of get you jump-started. Then their therapy becomes much more fruitful, because they got past some of those stuck places by bypassing the conscious mind and get into these inner mind places.
Fascinating. So this is the perfect time to stop for this segment.
Okay.
We have one more. I still have lots to talk about. And yes. So for everybody watching, we will be right back after this break. And we are back. I'm just going to jump right in.
Oh, okay. Jump in, baby. Turn that spigot on.
Exactly. It's a lot to talk about. So, Michael, how do you think that people can begin the process? Like, what would be your first step that you can actually share with people into creating a different reality for themselves and living a spiritual life as an experiential thing?
Right. So I would say, first of all, start tracking yourself. Notice where you want to blame somebody for something, where you're not taking responsibility. Keep a little journal of that. And then I would say, wherever you live, wherever you are, look for therapies or things that allow you to get past that, right? That would be a first step. I would totally suggest you learn meditation. Some form of meditation. There's all kinds. There's walking meditations. There's active meditations. It's not just sitting in a chair in a cave somewhere,
Sure.
right? Though that could be fun too, right? And find the one you like. But I would always recommend a little bit over a long period of time is much better. Meditating 10 minutes or 15 minutes 5 times a week is way more powerful than 1 hour once a week. So doing a little bit a lot.
Right.
And one of the things we learned in positive psychology is that to make a big change, it's much better to make small changes. So if you want to have a more spiritual life, well, a more spiritual life means you're more loving towards others, means you feel interconnected with people, right? You're giving, you feel you want to give to others, be of service to others, right?
Yeah.
And so I would say, look at your life. And how can I do that 2 to 5% better this month? Not 50% better. 2 to 5%.
Something practical.
Something
2 to 5%,
little.
yeah.
Something you could really do, but then do it consistently. Then when you get through about 30 days, say, okay, what other 2% change can I make? And if you keep doing that over the course of a year, you'll look back and say, wow, a lot has changed.
Right.
Right. So those are practical things that that really work. Right. The conscious mind is your rational mind that tries to figure it out. So you need to have time where you're not doing that. You need to have more artistic time where things can flow, times where things are spontaneous. So get involved in activities and things where you can do that, and then you're activating that other part of your mind.
Yeah, creativity, right?
Right. Anything with creativity is anything that uses your imagination. The conscious mind has no imagination.
Right.
Can't think
It's
in,
very black and white.
right.
Yeah.
And if you're thinking in pictures in your mind, you're in your inner mind. Conscious mind doesn't even know how to do that, right? So those are things that you can do. I would suggest that you always put some service work into your life to give to others, because that helps you realize your whole world is not just you, the little you, right? Because that's just the ego personality.
Right.
A spiritual person understands that we're much bigger. If I were to encapsulate what's changed in the last 15, 20 years for me, it's who I identify with, who I think I am. I used to think of myself one way, now I think of myself totally differently.
That's fascinating.
And when I meet somebody, one of my spiritual teacher, I go to a school every year.
Right.
I have a spiritual, we call it a mystery school, every year. And one of the things my teacher always tells me, she says, when I listen to somebody, I always think they have something valuable to tell me. That's her point of view.
What a great way to go around in life, actually. Yeah.
And you know what?
Because
They
you always
probably
expect
do.
the best.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I feel like sometimes we are already expecting people to bring something negative or awful into our lives. We have a existing picture of who
Yes.
someone is or should be.
Right, and then you
Right.
can't really see what's there.
Yeah.
So to take that point of view is huge, and allows you to really see, and it actually makes you a good listener. Often when we listen to people, we got all these negative judgments, you already, have some talk in your mind.
Yes.
You're not listening.
Yeah.
And you can't find the gold, you can't find what's there for you. So I think I've learned, I pay attention to what people tell me.
Yeah.
I always feel like they have something interesting to tell me.
Sure, and just being present, right?
Yeah.
Is fascinating. So I know that this is the last segment, but I cannot let you go
Right.
without asking you about the work that you do with the women who are at the federal prison, I believe, right, at
Yes,
Bedford Hills.
that's right.
What is the type of work that you do with them?
Well, believe it or not, everything we talked about, I do with them in the visiting room. And I
Wow.
visit I usually have about 5 or 6 people I visit. Once a week, I kind of round robin it. And and you can imagine being incarcerated, and this is, these people were convicted for murder, were
Yes.
convicted for grand larceny and all the different things. So I hear all the stories. I do regression therapy with them in the visiting room. I teach them about spirituality. We do meditations. I teach them, I send them books to read. We talk about it. And I get them to see the spiritual aspect of things and to work with those feelings. And when I hear some of those stories, it's so heartbreaking. I mean, you have a mother who's a drug addict who locked their daughter, in the closet for 7 hours.
Oh my goodness.
Stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, you can imagine what kind of life,
Yeah.
choices they think they have. But they can make new choices, and they have. And I have some of these women I work with for years, right? And it's amazing how they've changed. So if you're listening to this and you think you got bad problems,
Right.
ain't nothing like what these people have, and it can change. That's my message. If I can get the one message across, that you're not stuck with your bad story, that can change. You have the power to change it if you do the right processes. I haven't met anybody I couldn't help who came to me. So just know that it can change. Just find the right processes. Just search for it. Just be inspired and know that can change, and that who you are really is so much bigger than that little story you have. Right. You are so wonderful. You have so much spirit and energy, and this little ego personality is just one little piece of who you are.
Yeah.
You can find that bigger you, like I have, and it's just an amazing thing to find. It's an amazing thing to feel, and it changes how you think about life.
That's fantastic. So before we go,
Yes.
the name of the show is I Am.
Right.
And this is the question that I like to ask each of my guests.
Okay.
So basically, if you had to define yourself, and you were just talking about how
Right.
expensive and
Right.
life can be, and
Right.
to look outside of the ego
Right.
mind. So if you were able to define yourself, how would you define yourself today in this moment? If you had to complete the sentence, I am.
Okay. I would say I am God. So I would say everybody's God. Everybody came from a spark of God. We all have that consciousness, and spirituality is going back and unraveling and discovering that you're God, really. That's what the enlightened masters say, and that's the truth, and that's what I found out. I can't say I can operate like God, but I know what that means, and I know my soul. I know these higher parts of me. I'm getting acquainted with them over the years, and so my identity has changed. But you are omnipresent. You are the totality of everything, this universe, all universes. That's who you really are.
Wow.
You asked.
Yes, I did ask. That was great. I just need a moment to digest it, and it was great. So thank you so much for
All
being
right, my
here,
pleasure.
Michael. I really appreciate having you on the show.
Right, and I'm happy. Anybody's listening,
Yeah.
you can go to my website and look at what I do. I'm happy to talk to you over the phone, and if I can be of any help or point in the right direction, I'd love to, or work with you, or I teach classes, so all kinds of things I do. If I can reach out in any way that can be helpful, nothing makes me happier. As you can see, I work in the prisons. I volunteer. I'm a hospice volunteer. I like to help people.
And to be of service.
And to be of service.
Right.
Because it's great.
It is great. So thank you so much. Your information will be on the show so people can visit your website, get in touch with you. I hope that a lot of people are able to be inspired by this and take action.
Okay.
So,
me too.
Thank you very much.
All right.
And for everybody watching, thank you once again for being with us. And we will see you next week for a new episode of I Am. Thank you.